Welcome to Das Won't Hunt. I'm Jap here at Ruth for Information Week. And in this episode, we are going to be doing the part two of the Beyond the Election podcast series, looking not only at this time and space that we are in leading into the upcoming United States presidential election, but actually speaking to the time beyond, that space that organizations are going to potentially have to face and make choices and decisions, not about the election itself, but about things that are relevant to their own operations as they apply to the technology space. This particular episode, they've called it the long fight versus bad actors that might play a role not only during this time, during this election phase, but even the days, months, after, potentially years after, regardless of what the results may be, because there are those who definitely might have things that they might want to do to infiltrate and make use of organizations' resources or tamper with their resources in the days and weeks and months to come. And for this conversation, as always, trying to draw together a good group of folks who have different perspectives. We have Carl Wearn, Head of Threat Intelligence Analysis and Future Ops at Mimecast. Robert Johnston, Co-founder and CEO of Adlumin. Mike Wiacek, CEO of Stairwell. Armaan Mahbod, Vice President of Security and Business Intelligence with DTEX Systems. And Adam Darrah, Vice President of Intelligence with ZeroFox. All of you, thank you so much for making yourselves available for this conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, we are going to be taking a look at, this discussion is going to be on, what should organizations do, or how should they orient their security, some of their defenses for this, what will be eventually, no matter what, will be the post-election landscape. And, we are looking at the potential for hacktivists and other bad actors might be backed by aggressor states, getting up to who knows what things that they might have already been doing. So, Carl, I was wondering if you could kind of help us out. What types of attacks could be launched on behalf of aggressor states against companies and potentially public organizations, and it even could be things that have already been done that we've already seen?
The stuff that's already been seen, probably supplemented by AI-assisted technologies as well, increasingly, which are being reported by law enforcement and open source. But ranging from your data breaches for information to full-blown espionage, ransomware attacks, and more, probably more destructively and more importantly, as we've seen in Ukraine, used against them is wiper attacks, which are basically ransomware akin to that, but their intention is just purely destructive, disruptive, along with increases in DDoS attacks again. I mean, most of that's covered in open source, but I think we're going to see the whole range of that on a much higher level and much higher volume. It's increased by about 20% year on year for our figures up to now, and we expect that to continue or gather pace.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that input. Armaan, can you give us some kind of perspective on, what are some types of organizations that might find themselves to be targets or have already been targets, for these types of hacktivists or just, other bad actors that might be, really trying to make things happen that are rather unpleasant?
Yeah, very, very unpleasant. No, we've actually seen a multitude of foreign interference going on over the past few years. Obviously, even more of a rise there. Even more recently, there's been, even in Korea, supposedly 10,000 jobs have been taken up by the same individual with the same name, right? And applied to. So, it's very interesting how foreign interference plays a big part in this. Although from an external threat perspective, that's very concerning. It's a lot of times now external threat actors or foreign interferers trying to gain physical access or virtual access into businesses, right? These are kind of where laptop farms are now being held. The laptop is being shipped to somewhere in the US, and then that's being, again, dropped back to an external location of some sort. And for us, we've seen that through our geolocation, other stuff like that, which has been very insightful and helpful for a lot of companies, mainly in telecom and in critical infrastructure are the biggest targets, but actually everyone is a target. Anybody who's making tech, who has any play in supply chain, is a massive target, really big or small, we've seen, which is very interesting.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Mike, are there, kind of like piggybacking off of that, are there particular ongoing threats that should be watched for, planned for? Are there particular kinds, even if particular types of attacks that have kind of been recurring, kind of rearing their ugly head across, maybe particular sectors, but other sectors should be paying attention to this?
Yeah, I think you see a lot when it comes to where AI is an enabler for things like social engineering and misinformation in the context of the election. I think you definitely saw back in the 2016 election, with like the DNC compromise and some of that stuff that happened there, where it was much more of a traditional like APT style attack to steal data. Now what you're seeing, I think there's more leverage for advanced adversaries to go after the hearts and minds of people. And so when you start looking at the ability of like LLMs to start crafting narratives and not only post misinformation or disinformation, but actually engage with other users, you start seeing this like incredibly high saturation effect that a society itself gets more polarized on whichever side you see. It's polarized on both. It starts creating more of an amplification factor, which pushes the sides further apart. And then you start seeing that. So it's not a traditional like, malware attack with, lateral movement and stuff, which still happens. The more worrisome thing is the way that AI and LLMs are allowing what used to be like psyops in the US military and stuff to actually start driving people further apart, isolating them and creating more of a divisive narrative.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you very much for that. Adam, when it comes down to it, is money really at the root of cyber attacks? Regardless of, there might be an aggressor state that is backing something, but in terms of those who are actually engaged in these activities, is really money really kind of like the driver to get them to, get at their keyboards and, start cranking out bad, nasty code?
Well, it's a cool question. And, I would say that it depends on who is doing it. The simple answer is yes, money is a defining motivator. However, if a Russian state-backed actor or fellow traveler is involved in it, money is part of the system no matter what, through kickbacks, bribes, protection, racketeering. So if a Russian state-backed actor is hands on keyboard being evil, then money's only part of it. It's money and reputation. Money and reputation. That's I would say it's a very evil marriage when it comes to these kind of shenanigans, especially with Intel-led shenanigans. So money is at the core, but right next to it is influence and reputation. Whether that is to increase one's own reputational standing, to ingratiate yourself to the regime, to the Putin regime, or to damage the reputation of a U.S. or European champion, right? Some kind of industry, a titan of industry, to humiliate, to steal the data. So like nothing's ever done for one thing, especially when you're talking about sophisticated near peer adversaries like Russia and China. And so yes, money's part of it, but espionage is part of it. Economic gain, it's part of it. Embarrassing, blackmailing, that's also part of it, right? So nothing's ever done for just one reason. And when it's an intelligence-led operation, then it gets even murkier, because then they make intentional decisions to release, not release, get caught. I was on the inside in 2016. I'm a recovering CIA officer. Was a Russia specialist. Up through 2016 through 2018, I was in the agency doing Russia stuff, and it's like, okay, if they get caught, why did they want to get caught, right? So again, like there's calculus involved, but yes, In short, money, absolutely.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that. We're going to be circling back to flesh that out a bit more. Robert, is ransomware the top or one of the top weapons per se that hacktivists or just black hat hackers deploy? And if not that, then what seems to be kind of like what are the like some of the top like weapons per se when it comes to cyber attacks?
In today's security landscape, e-crime or criminal crime-based attacks are certainly the most prevalent, and they're the most vocal because they always have monetary damages associated with them, whether it's ransomware or some kind of destruction or extortion. Is becoming more and more common. I think probably the most dangerous place on the internet, and whether that leads to ransomware or not today, the most dangerous place is cloud email. Cloud email is by far, the most breached corporate asset in the middle market and SMB. It's not that nation states aren't out there still running intelligence collection on each other. We do it, they do it. Every intel agency in the world is in the business of collecting intelligence. This is the status quo. What is on the rise is mostly SMB, middle market, e-crime, crime-based attacks, where business email compromise, I think, leads the way. And whether or not that kind of transpires into a ransomware or extortion attack over a matter of a couple of weeks, it's typically where it's headed after business email compromise. But that is by far the most dangerous place on the internet. In reference to the election, however, I think you're not going to see a rise in these types of breaches. You're going to see status quo. You may see election-themed phishing emails and election-themed initial attacks. The intelligence community released their assessment to Congress, and they said, hey, we're going to experience attacks all the way through the election. What the intelligence community does, though, is they kind of conflate cyber breaches and normal ransomware, status quo security attacks with also disinformation and influence operations. They conflate those two. So when they say cyber attacks, they mean it all. But specifically through the election, what they're really getting at in that IC report was that disinformation and potentially the fermenting of unrest, regardless of who wins. If the Democrats win, they'll agitate the Republicans. If the Republicans win, they'll agitate the Democrats, right? And so that is what they're getting at. That will continue beyond the election. And things in today's political environment from both sides have proven to turn violent. Like that's kind of where we are as a country. That's where the state of our politics is things can and do turn to violence. So that has me more concerned than an uptick in business email compromise or ransomware. That will be status quo.
To listen to the entire conversation, look for the DOS1 Hunt podcast on Spreaker, Spotify, Amazon Music, and other popular podcast platforms.